United Way the Ad Council.
WWE superstar Alberto Del Rio. Behold the angry giant.
Try it again.
Behold the angry giant.
Perfect. Good luck today.
Behold the angry giant.
Yay! Read me another one, Dad.
This is WWE superstar Alberto Del Rio. It only takes a moment to make a moment. Take time to be a dad today.
Visit FlutterGood.gov, brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Man, do I love hard nights. Ready, boys? You got a king?
Oh, what's that?
Oh, come on. This is WWE superstar Alberto Del Rio. It only takes a moment to make a moment. Take time to be a dad today. Learn more at 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov.
Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Hey everyone, let's all stop what we're doing and take a moment. You see?
All right, I'm ready when you are.
Special. And they give you loud moments, goofy moments, dorky moments. It doesn't matter. Because every time dads like us take a moment like that to spend with our kids, well, it's pretty momentous. This is WGBB AM 1240 and W240 GFFM 95.9 Freeport, New York.
The views expressed in the following program do not necessarily represent those of the staff, management, or owners of WGBB. Live from the WGBB studios in Merritt, New York, this is SportsTalk New York.
And that's right, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once again to Sports Talk New York. And I'm your host, Rob Cramer. Thanks for tuning in here. We got a lot to get into tonight on this beautiful September 26th, 2021 edition of Sports Talk New York. Like I said, I'm Rob Cramer. I'm your host for the next hour. And we got a lot to get into today. We had a full slate of sports activities on the day today around the New York area. Kicking it off at 1 o'clock, we had the Giants starting things off. We had the Mets coming on at 2 p.m. today, followed by the Jets at 4 p.m. And then the Yankees and the Red Sox picked things up at 7, followed by the Rangers and the New York Islanders kicking off their preseason slate of games, as hockey, believe it or not, is also now back. The only sport we're missing right now is basketball. That'll be back in the next few weeks as well. But even without that, we still got a lot today. We got a lot of losses to cover today, too, as the Giants, Mets, and Jets all went down immediately. Really, really rough Sunday here in the New York area. But before we get into all that, we'll have enough misery to cover for the next hour. I mean, unless you're talking about the New York Islanders and the New York Yankees. But outside of those two teams, there's a lot of pain going around right now. But if you want to see more about this show, you could check out any of our old shows, all the hosts, anything like that, all your Sports Talk New York information at sportstalkny.com. That's sportstalkny.com. You could also check out anything from this whole station, Long Island's oldest radio station, WGBB, AM 1240, WGBB.com. Check that out at your leisure. And also on social media, you can check us out at WGBB Sports Talk for this show and at WGBB Radio. Give us a like on Facebook for both the same thing as well. So thanks for tuning in tonight. And now after all that, I'd like to kick it off with a little New York Giants talk. We'll start with the football, and I'll get into the baseball, and with whatever time we have left, we'll cover a little bit of this Rangers-Islanders preseason game going on right now in the preseason opener for both squads. Gerard Gallant, his coaching debut for the New York Rangers at Madison Square Garden, so a very fun evening there, as a lot of kids are in the lineup tonight for both squads. But starting off with the Giants and the football, side of things here in New York. Now, we all know football in this town has been bad for quite some time. I mean, for both these teams, the Jets and the Giants, it's been a long time since either of these teams were playing meaningful games late in the season. As for the Giants, it's been since 2016. That team made the playoffs. They lost that infamous game after the boat, with the guys all hanging out on the boat, going down to Florida and partying with Odell Beckham Jr. and those other dudes, and maybe not quite taking the playoff game as seriously as they should have. But they ended up losing that game to Green Bay, and haven't even sniffed the playoffs since then. So aside from that, the Giants have had a lot of high draft picks lately. Saquon Barkley, speaking of one of those former draft picks, was looking a little bit closer to his old self today as he continues to come back from an ACL injury that devastated his career early on last season. He's still trying to work it back into shape, but otherwise today he had 16 carries for 51 yards, scored his first touchdown since the injury. So that is good news for the Giants fans. What's bad news for Giants fans is that they ended up losing this game 17-14. Very, very tough game to watch. Tough game to watch and lose if you're a Giants fan, as the Giants had two leads late, one early and one late, as they led 6-0 early on, allowed the touchdown to go back down 7-6. Then they were up 14-7 after they scored a touchdown and got the 2-point conversion. Ended up blowing that lead to 14-14 before you knew it, and the eventual game-winning field goal to seal it 17-14, as Daniel Jones had a decent day out there. The Giants' other former high draft pick, the number 6 overall pick a couple of years ago, Daniel Jones, 24 of 35, 266 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. Played a decent game. I wouldn't necessarily call it mistake-free. I wouldn't necessarily call it a great game or a good game even, but it was a passable game. It's a game that they should have been able to win, especially against a very, very poor Falcons team that most people aren't giving a chance to even sniff the playoff this year, as well as the Giants. But one guy I also want to focus on is the tight end Evan Ingram. This guy has kind of been, as Winston Churchill once said, a mystery wrapped in an enigma. And that is what you can really say describes Giants tight end Evan Ingram. He came out of the chute a couple of years ago and had a really good rookie season. He looked like a guy that all they had to do was figure out a way to keep him healthy, and he would be a plus player, especially at the tight end position, a guy that can rely on, not so much in the blocking schemes, but definitely as a threat to catch passes and go the distance. And unfortunately for them, he's battled these injuries. He's battled inconsistent play. Sometimes he goes out there and he looks like Tony Gonzalez. Other times he goes out there and he looks like, a guy's that's going to get cut any day. And today he had one of those tough days. 2 carries, 21 yards, a big fumble, which really helped get the momentum on the Atlanta Falcons side. So very tough loss there. This is a bad loss for a bad Giants team to a bad Falcons team. And now, if you want to put the blame on somebody too, a guy that really has escaped a lot of the blame, a guy that really, from ownership at least, because of course the fans and media, some media, have tried to hold him accountable, Dave Gettleman, and even I have given Dave Gettleman, and I'm not a Giants fan, I have tried to give Dave Gettleman the benefit of the doubt at times, but when you look at the product on the field today, it all starts from the head down, and obviously Gettleman's not even the tippy top of the head. The tippy top of the head is John Mara, who, by the way, was booed today by New York Giants fans, and he was booed today during the Eli Manning number retirement ceremony. Eli Manning, the Giants' 2-time Super Bowl winning quarterback, had his number 10 raised today for their team. Nobody in Giants history again will ever wear number 10. Eli's name, already had been etched in Giants history with his 2 incredible Super Bowl wins over the Patriots in 2007 and 2011. And now he's, going to be memorialized forever, and deservedly so. But one thing you can tell how upset and passionate these Giants fans are right now is that they were booing John Mara during this ceremony, which is supposed to be nothing but good feelings. And you can't blame Giants fans for booing him, and you can't blame Giants fans for having bad feelings towards this team. There's been nothing but bad play, losing, and incompetence for the last 5-6 years. And realistically, it goes back even further than that. Starting in 2012, the year after their Super Bowl championship season, there's been a sharp decline. And even you can count that year too, they didn't get hot until the end of the year. If they didn't beat the Jets in that Christmas Eve game, which really propelled them to the playoffs and propelled them on the playoff run, we might be talking about the Giants having done nothing since the 2007 Super Bowl, where they beat the Patriots and stopped the undefeated season in the most unlikely and craziest of fashion. But, right now you got Dave Gettleman at 15-36 as the general manager of this Giants team. Let me say that again. 15 wins and 36 losses. Terrible. More than double the losses than he has for the wins. And the head coach that he hired, the second head coach that he's hired now, Joe Judge, is 6-13 at the helm after this loss today, after dropping to 0-3 for the second straight season. And it's not going to get easier for the Giants next week. Same thing with the Jets, who we'll get to in a minute. You're not going to have an easy task for 2 really bad New York football teams next week, as we have the Giants the Giants going on the road to play the New Orleans Saints at the Superdome. Now, if you remember a couple weeks ago, with the hurricane and everything, and the bad weather and everything that was hitting New Orleans, there was question that if this game was going to be played there. Everything's been worked out. The Saints are back home. The game will be taking place at the Superdome next week, October 3rd. It's going to be a really, really big game for the Saints. They're 2-1 now. Jameis Winston is looking pretty good. He looks refreshed and surrounded by talent. They're coming off a big 28-13 victory over New England today, so they're feeling good about themselves. That was on the road in New England, too. So, and you could say what you want about Mac Jones, and if the Patriots have misplaced their trust in giving him the reins over a guy like Cam Newton, who was a more pedigreed type quarterback and, a veteran presence there at least. But the Patriot defense is really good. Really, really good. One of the best in the league. And the fact that Jameis Winston played a pretty mistake-free game, didn't turn the ball over today, threw a couple of touchdowns, and looked like a leader out there for that team, that's a really big step for Winston himself and the Saints as a team in this now post-Drew Brees era. So, definitely got to keep your eyes on that. The Saints are definitely riding high, but the Giants are not riding high. On the opposite end of the spectrum, they're 0-3 for the second straight year and looking to avoid an 0-4 start. And, if you start 0-4, you're running the risk of becoming irrelevant before, now with this new 18-game season or 17-game season. It's a 17-game season, but it's a 18-week season. So, weeks-wise, you won't even be a third of the way through the year, and you'll be pretty much irrelevant, pretty much done, and, cast off the back pages for any good reason. I'm sure the Jets, who we'll get to in 1 second now, are going to be somewhere near the back pages, but it's not going to be for any good reasons. The the Giants lost a hard-fought battle to a bad team. Okay, you can take that. But now, when we look at the Jets, who, as we turn the page here, they're also 0-3. Talking about the Giants falling 0-3. The Jets, now we said the Giants were 0-3 for the second straight season. Well, guess what? The Jets just said, hey, Giants, hold my beer for a second, because we're going to be 0-3 for the third straight year. That's how bad football is getting in this part, in New York. Which, who would have thought, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the Jets and the Giants were both relevant teams, both good. Now, these teams are so far away from being relevant, so far away from being good. This time really only can be harkened back to in the 1970s, when the Jets missed the playoffs for 10 straight years, which, by the way, the Jets have tied now. If the Jets miss the playoffs this year, it'll be 10 straight. And, the Giants are out of the playoffs every year since 2016, so 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 now. This would be the 5th consecutive year the Giants have missed the playoffs. Just nothing but incompetence from these two teams. But like I said, the Jets lost today to the Denver Broncos 26-0. That's right, I said 26-0. And no, Adam Gase did not come back to coach the team the last couple of weeks. Adam Gase did not have the reins of the offense that we so rightfully so criticized during his tenure here in New York. The Jets have so far, if you look last year, the Jets were 0-3, like I said. Through those 3 games, they were outscored 94-37. Terrible. Absolutely terrible. Well, this year, they've been outscored 70-20. So somehow, even though the Jets' offense was terrible last year, through 3 games, they've actually managed to score 17 less points than they did last year. Incredible. It doesn't make sense. It boggles the mind how bad the Jets have been through these first couple of games, offensively. Really, the only time they looked like a competent offense was in the second half of the first game against Carolina. The entire game against the Patriots are a really good defensive team, so I'm not going to kill them for it. But the entire game against the Patriots, they looked bad. You had Zach going out there throwing 4 interceptions, looking terrible. This week, he goes out there, they get shut out. All they mustered last week was 2 field goals. They mustered nothing today. They had a chance to make it 10-3 early on and hit a 56-yard field goal, which rookie kicker Matt Amendola did hit. He drilled a 56-yarder right down the middle, but then they had a 5-yard penalty for delay of game, which was ridiculous, and they deserved it, though. It wasn't a bad call by the officials. It was just ridiculous that the holder couldn't get the snap down and the ball down in time. Absolutely ridiculous that the Jets ended up blowing that. They cost themselves 5 yards. It went from a 56-yard field goal to a 61-yard field goal. I understand Robert Saleh not wanting to get crazy, especially if you watched football all day like I did. You saw the game earlier in the day where, a 109-yard was a 109-yard touchdown was brought back by the Jacksonville special teams player, who took it back to the house after a missed 68-yard field goal attempt. But then also, on the other side of the coin, in today, also, you saw the Baltimore Ravens kicker Justin Tucker drill a game-winning 66-yard field goal as time expired. I still can't believe. That's a typical Detroit Lions way to lose. As they lost to the Baltimore Ravens today. But really, really incredible how, with such regularity, these coaches are attempting 60-plus yard field goals today. And guys are hitting them, too. It's not, you used to hear, if a guy would attempt for a 60 or 61-yard field goal, you'd roll your eyes and say, there's no way he's even going to come close to hitting it. And now, guys like Justin Tucker are hitting it. And it's really incredible to see. With but to continue on with the Jets, I mentioned Adam Gase. It's a Gase-like offense that we've seen. The run game is non-existent. They actually managed to rush for 150 yards, which, by the way, a couple of years ago, in 2018, the Jets had Chris Ivory still. He had a gigantic game against the Denver Broncos, right around this time in the season, week 4, week 5, right around there. 3 or 4 years ago, whatever it was, 2018, I believe it was. And he had a game where he ran for over 200 yards, set a bunch of Jet single-game records, looked great, was incredible. Since then, that was a game where the Jets ran for over 250 yards as a team. Since then, the Jets have only run for 150 yards in a game 3 times, including last week. And they didn't come close to that number today. Just absolutely terrible. They had no answers for the good defensive scheme that was run out there by Fangio and the Denver Broncos today. Matt LaFleur, he's the younger brother of Packers head coach Mike LaFleur. And, you just sit here and say that this kid looked completely outmatched today. He was playing checkers while the other coaches were playing chess. The old, that old gag. And it was just another non-competitive game. Over the last 2 weeks, we've seen the Jets be outscored 52-6. It's just the same old Jets, and I know the people over there in Floral Park, New Jersey, hate to hear that, but it looks like the same old Jets right now. It smells like the same old Jets right now, and guess what? They're the same old Jets. A couple of questions: is it preparation? Is it coaching? Is it the players? What is the problem right now? I know the Jets aren't the most talented team in football. I know the Jets probably wouldn't even be in the top 20 to 25 most talented teams in football. But they have talent. They have something now. They have a better offensive line than what we've seen so far, and they haven't played it. I know Mekhi Becton is down, and him being injured doesn't help. But the offensive line, Vera Tucker, McGovern, Fant, all those guys have to play better. And they have to start opening more paths for the running game, which the running game also has to step up. Another guy, Zach Wilson, he has to step up today. 19 for 35, 160 yards, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Terrible. Cannot happen. Means the last 2 weeks against the Broncos and the Patriots, he's got no touchdowns and 6 interceptions. Unacceptable. No matter if he's getting bad breaks or bad play from his receivers, it's bad play from a couple of receivers and everything isn't going to relate to 6 interceptions over 2 weeks. That's on the quarterback too. And I'm not saying that he is blaming anybody else, but I don't want fans or his coaches or people in the media to give him a break because he's played bad over the last 2 weeks. And so far we've seen one really good half of football from Zach Wilson through 3 games. And that's concerning. And guess what? Guess who suddenly doesn't look like the worst player to ever play the game of football? Sam Darnold actually looks like a passable quarterback when he has competent coaching, competent players, and he's in a environment right now that is not crushing him from every side. So I tip my cap to Sam Darnold because the kid deserves a little bit of help, and he's finally getting it. Robert Saleh, I still like Robert Saleh, not only as a coach, but as a guy. I think Robert Saleh is a good guy. I think he has the right mindset for this, and I think he needs to find a way to start building something. The team looked lost today. They looked lost. They looked in disarray, especially on the offensive side. The defense has been doing their best to keep him in it, and I know that's Saleh's game. Being on the defensive side of the ball. Mosley's looked good. Quinn Williams has looked good. But we had a lot of discipline issues. They had some really big penalties. We mentioned One of them earlier before that cost them a field goal. There was another one where they, when they were receiving the ball, they had the illegal block. They had 8 or 9 penalties today. You have to bring that number down, cut it in half if you can, because you're giving away yards, you're giving away first downs. And for most of the game today, until the end where they got a couple of first downs in garbage time, the Jets actually had more penalties than first downs, which is just a disgrace. That's a disgrace. That can't happen. That's something that you see in college football when you're having a Division I team play a Division III team. And unfortunately, right now the Jets are playing like a Division III team. And I don't expect it to get any better next week when they're playing the when the Jets are having another tough opponent. They're in it's just another test for this team, for this young quarterback, and they have to keep their heads up because most likely you're playing the Titans next week. Mike Vrabel, one of the best coaches in football the last couple of years, he's a guy that actually outmaneuvered Bill Belichick in the playoffs last year. And Vrabel, it's a case of the student beating the teacher, the former Patriot linebacker coming back and knocking off his former coach and former teammate Tom Brady too at the time. It's just really, really interesting how this is all going to break out. The Jets and the Giants look like two teams en route to 0-4 starts, and the Jets really need to change that. For just Robert Saleh needs to get a win. He needs to get that first head coaching win, and teams need to know that it's not the 2-14 team. The 2-14 team that you can just come in and roll over. But right now, it's looking dangerously close to that. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our first break of the day. I want to thank you for sticking around with me here on this Sunday night at Sports Talk New York. If you want to check us out at WGBB Sports Talk on Twitter and Facebook, see what we got coming up. But I'll be back in a minute with a little baseball talk and a little hockey. So catch you in a minute. Thanks for sticking around.
You're listening to Sports Talk New York.
Tune in every Sunday night at 8 p.m. on Long Island's
WGBB, broadcasting on 95.9 FM and 1240 AM, or listen live online at WGBBradio.com.
Country Foot Care, official podiatrist of the New York Lizards, has been delivering state-of-the-art foot care with good old-fashioned caring to Long Island residents for over 30 years. Specialists in sports medicine and injury. Country Foot Care can be reached at 516-741-FEED or online at countryfootcare.com.
Stay connected to Sports Talk New York on WGBB by following us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at WGBB Sports Talk.
Unflippable, unflappable, unleakable. The Gustbuster is the only umbrella that won't flip inside out, rip, tear, or leak. Capable of withstanding winds over 55 miles per hour. All of our umbrellas are constructed of the finest quality materials and backed by a limited lifetime guarantee. What are you waiting for? Visit GustBuster.com and get your Gustbuster today.
You're listening to Sports Talk New York on Long Island's WGBB. And now, back to the show.
And welcome back to the show, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Rob Cramer. Sitting here with you on this Sunday night as we're getting late into the evening here. 9:30 p.m. right here on the East Coast. WGBB Sports Talk New York coming at you. You can check me out actually on Twitter if you want to see my social media at my last name Cramer NY. That's CRAMERNY. So you can check that out on Twitter if you want to give me a follow. I'd appreciate that. And check us out, on Facebook and Twitter and everything else too at WGBB Sports Talk. So right now, if you're watching the Yankee game, We got a thrilling game going on up in Boston right now, 2-1, as these two teams fight for the final playoff spot right now. The Yankees, Red Sox, and Blue Jays in a dead heat for this right now. Yankees and Red Sox tied exactly. Blue Jays a game and a half back. So whoever wins this game tonight takes first place in the wild card slot for the American League. The Red Sox currently have 2 on, nobody out, as the Yankees have Rodriguez in right now to face Christian Vasquez. 2-1 Yankee lead, trying to protect it. DJ LeMahieu had the RBI hit earlier in the game that gave the Yankees the lead. And, the Yankees need to keep winning. That's all you have to do. The American League East is already out the window, surprisingly. The Tampa Bay Rays already clinched, game over. Even with the other tough teams in their division, you have 3 other teams that are going to win 90 games. I mean, the Yankees, Red Sox, and Blue Jays are all going to win 90 games. Only 2 of those teams are going to make the playoffs because the Tampa Bay Rays already punched their ticket. So we'll get to the Yankees as they continue their run right now. Here in Boston, got a 2-1 lead right now in the 7th, as I said. But I got some things that I want to get off my chest pertaining to the other team in New York right now, the New York Mets. As we'll get to the Yankees, I'll give you updates too if you can't keep up. If you're not watching on TV or following John and Susan on the radio, I'll give you a couple updates if anything happens, if the Yankees get up this inning. But as for the Mets, the orange and blue team in New York, they lost 8-4 today in Milwaukee. Terrible job by the Mets. It's just been an absolute slog over the last few weeks for this club. They end up losing 8-4 today, which allows the Milwaukee Brewers to complete the sweep, and not only complete the sweep, but clinch their division as they erased a 3-game, a 3 magic number. All 3 got away from them this weekend as they pounded the Mets into submission. And this is something that, as I really didn't have the heart to watch the celebration on the field of the Milwaukee Brewers clinching the National League Central. I didn't want to see it. I had no interest. But I hope that a lot of these young Mets players, not Lindor, not Javi Baez, not, DeGrom, who I'm sure was in the dugout, or, a guy like Syndergaard, or guys that have been there, they didn't have to sit there and watch it because they've been to the World Series. They've experienced the highs and the lows of playoff baseball and high stakes baseball and stuff like that. I want guys like Pete Alonso to sit there and watch that. I want guys like J.D. Davis and Dom Smith and James McCann, for that matter, and a lot of these guys, Jeff McNeil, who Tomas Nido, who have never played a playoff game. Taijuan Walker, for obviously Marcus Stroman has played in the playoffs. He was with the Blue Jays when they went to a couple of ALCS runs. As a sacrifice fly, by the way, just ties the game for Boston now, 2-2 in the 7th as the Red Sox dugout explodes. Still got a runner on second, so I'll keep you updated on that too. But here's the thing too. Okay, so when we look at it, and also another note too, the Islanders just closed the door on a 4-0 victory over the Rangers. So nice little way to start the season for the Islanders as they win 4-0 in Madison Square Garden to open the preseason. But moving on about the Mets. So the last time I sat here was just over a month ago. And when I sat here, the Mets were 60-61, and when I sat here, I said to myself, it felt very similar to 2016. When, if you're a Met fan, if you remember, coming off that World Series appearance season in 2015, the Mets, through the first 121 games of 2016, had the same record that they did this year, 60-61. Not good. Not terrible, but also definitely not good. And I thought that they had to produce a same record, or a very similar one, for that matter, to make the playoffs, or at least keep themselves relevant at this point. And I said that would mean that over the final 41 games, they'd have to go 27-14. And in 2016, the Mets did just that. They went 27-14, finished the season at 87-75, tied the San Francisco Giants for the one-game playoff, and then ended up losing to Madison Bumgarner in that wild card playoff game, where they ended up losing with the 3-run shot by Connor Gillespie off of Jerry's Familia late. But unlike that team that produced a 27-14 record, through 34 of those 41 games so far, the Mets have produced a 13-21 record to drop their record from 60-61 to now 73-82. And with that 82nd loss, guaranteeing themselves at least a losing season for the 4th time in the last 5 years. Just terrible. A terrible way to cap off this year, which was supposed to be a great year, with Steve Cohen taking over as the new owner of the Mets, owning 95% of the club. They went out and did a lot of stuff this year. They held first place for 3 straight months, over 90 consecutive days in first place from May to July, just about August. And it just all went down the toilet. It all went down so quickly. It slipped through the Mets' fingers so easily, and you saw it happening in real time, and just couldn't do anything about it. After they were eliminated from the playoffs on Saturday night, sitting back, I think to myself, it's not entirely Luis Rojas' fault. And I don't think that he should get the brunt of the blame for this season. But one thing I became very aware of, and I guess that's just the best way to put it, the one thing I became very aware of is that Luis Rojas is not a difference maker on the bench. He's not a manager that's going to steal you a win. He's a manager that could actually end up costing you a couple of wins with his weird, robotic managerial style where, he's just he might as well be a computer that you're entering percentages in, and there's no feel to it, and it feels more to me like a minor league manager trying to not get the best out of his players instead of trying to get a win, because that's how you would manage in the minor leagues. It's not so much about the wins and the losses as it is seeing the growth out of your player. And I think that's kind of how he still manages, and you need to get the wins. You're in New York, you're in the top market in the entire country and world even, and I just really have to say that I think that Luis Rojas doesn't do that, and he doesn't get the most out of his roster. I used to think that a guy like Bobby Valentine would go out there, and if you had a 91-win team, Bobby V could take that team and squeeze an extra 4 or 5 wins out of it. So if it was a 91-win team, maybe he could make that team win 95 or 96 games. like he did with the '99 Mets, where they ended up winning '97 and making the playoffs and beating the Reds in a one-game playoff en route to the National League Championship Series against the Braves that year. But when it comes to Luis Rojas, I think he could take a 90-win team and make them an 88-win team with some of his decision making. So maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't know. Maybe I'm being hard on Louis. I'm trying not to, but it was a complete failure across the board from the Mets. Francisco Lindor needs to take a lot of heat from this year. Just a terrible, terrible year. Now, my hope and my feeling is that this was Lindor's bad transitional year. This was the year where, he was transitioning National League to American League, new city, smaller city to much bigger city, things like that. And it feels to me a lot like Carlos Beltran's transitional year, where he went from, Kansas City / half a year in Houston to New York. And 2005, he had a good year where it was, he hit around 275, 16 home runs, 78 RBIs. And, when you look back on paper now, it doesn't look that bad. But then when you look back to the season that he had the following year when they won the division, where he hits 275, but he also adds 41 home runs and 116 RBIs, that's the Carlos Beltran season that you're used to seeing. So I think that we're going to see more typical Francisco Lindor next season, with the Mets better hope. And then obviously now that this season's coming to a close, maybe we'll see Jake one more time. On Tuesday, we're supposedly going to be seeing Noah Syndergaard join the team. So there's still a lot that you're going to be seeing over the next week before the Mets season comes to a close, mercifully. But then you have to remember, after this year, what do you do about Javi Baez? A month ago, most Met fans would have said, get him out of here. Now, Javi Baez has, if you look at the numbers that Javi Baez has put up since his acquisition on July 31st, statistically speaking, Javi Baez is one of the best deadline acquisitions the Mets have ever made, right up there with Yoenis Cespedes. And I know for Met fans that probably haven't been paying as close attention right now, you'd be saying to yourself, how is that even possible? But Javi Baez hitting over 300, hitting for power, walking more, playing great defense. I mean, you can say what you want, but Javi Baez also right now has the second highest OPS for players that were traded in July. Kyle Schwarber leads it with a 949 since that trade. Javi Baez is 914. So, Javi Baez has played at an elite level since being traded to New York. Oh my God. And as I'm saying this right now, the Yankees, for the second time this inning, botch a fly ball in this at-bat right now. There was a fly ball to the third baseman that was dropped in foul territory, which cost the Yankees a chance to get out of the inning. And then their left fielder, Joey Gallo, who's usually a very good defensive outfielder, came across to try to catch the pop-up following that and botched that one, and he dropped it. So now, after two terrible defensive plays, although Gallo did recover well and threw a strike to second base to cut down the advancing runner, but they just gifted the Red Sox the lead as a sac fly tied the game at 2-2, and now a botched ball in left field ended up putting the Yankees down 3-2 now, as they've seen their lead slip away. But just to finish up on the Mets here, as I see that happening right now, beyond the ownership role, obviously we've seen the change there that we needed. We went from the Wilpons to Steve Cohen last season, and to say the least, that's a step up. However, you're going to need someone now to be that liaison beyond Sandy Alderson and beyond Steve Cohen. You're going to need a guy to come in here and control baseball operations and hire his GM and everything along that line. And right now, I'm going to rattle off a couple of the contenders for this position. And for the first one, I'm going to include a manager too, because right now, it's tough to even think about. I think Luis Rojas is gone after this year. I'm not calling for his job. I like Louis as a guy. I think, actually, as a matter of fact, if they do fire him, he should be retained and reassigned within the organization and, use him somewhere else. Because he is a good baseball guy. I just don't think he's a great in-game manager at the major league level. But these are a couple of guys who they could bring in to take over. And one guy that has really been talked about recently is Billy Beane out in Oakland, who, if you know anything, if you've ever read the book Moneyball, which preceded the movie Moneyball, and Billy Beane and Sandy Alderson are pretty much what that movie was about. Sandy Alderson taught Billy Beane everything that he knew. Billy Beane said that he learned more under Sandy Alderson than anybody. They had such a close relationship. Billy really looked up to Sandy in a lot of ways and said that he cherished every single day that he worked under and with Sandy and would have continued to do it for as long as he possibly could have stretched that out. And also, too, what people are saying is that if Billy Beane comes here, there's a chance that maybe he could bring manager Bob Melvin along with him. And, the Athletics have employed Bob Melvin as the manager for a long time, and he's still considered one of the best managers in baseball today. As a matter of fact, former Met Yoenis Cespedes says that he still speaks glowingly about Bob Melvin to this day. Loves him, thinks he's the best manager he's ever had. So, a lot of high talk from Bob Melvin. I don't know how realistic that part of it is, but I do think that Billy Beane coming back to the Mets, and now a lot of people could sit there and say, well, what does he mean when he says back to the Mets? But Billy Beane was actually a former Met player. He played there as recently as 1995, and he was actually the Mets' first-round pick in 1980. So you really have to know that Billy has some roots in the Mets organization. He has connections with Sandy and a couple other guys. There's a chance that the Mets could lure Billy Beane out this way. And, look, another thing to talk about Billy Beane is that he's 59 years old now. He's not the young whippersnapper GM that we once knew when he was first installing his Moneyball and everything at the A's and winning all those games and letting Giambi walk and all that stuff. It's come a long way since then. And think about that. He's been the head guy ever since Sandy left in 1998. But Billy Beane has run the organization since 1998 and been the head guy. Ever since that point, now think about what years can you really remember? 2002, obviously they had that great year, the 20-game winning streak, and that was the year Moneyball really was put into work and everything. David Justice coming in, all this. That's what the movie was about. Other than that, they were in the ALCS in 2002. They were in the ALCS in 2006. They've never gone beyond that. And think about how long 2006 was. I mean, Met fans remember that was the Mets lost in Game 7 that year. The A's didn't even get that far. They ended up getting knocked out and in 4 straight against the Tigers. The Tigers broomed them very quickly to move on to the World Series. A lot of people thought we were going to be seeing potentially another Mets-A's matchup or a first ever Mets-Tigers matchup. Instead, we got neither, as it was the Cardinals and the Detroit Tigers locking up in the World Series for the first time since 1968 that year. And as you look around now, Billy Beane and Bob Melvin make sense with the connections and everything. There's a couple other guys I'm going to get to real quick. Is David Stearns. Now, David Stearns, he's 36 years old. He's the Milwaukee Brewers president of baseball operations and has been for the last few years. He's one of the better and more well-respected executives across baseball. And he's a New Yorker. He grew up in Queens, and he grew up a Mets fan. So there's that connection there. Does he want to come back home? Does he want to be the guy running the show for the billionaire new owner of the New York Mets, the team he grew up rooting for? This is a guy that has turned the Brewers into a perennial contender. The Mets just watched up close as his Milwaukee Brewers clinched yet another National League Central championship. So that's another name to keep in mind. Also, Josh Burns. Josh Burns, he was in the running, if you remember, from 2010 when they originally hired Sandy Alderson when the Wilpons were still calling the shots. Josh Burns was another guy in that running for the GM. He's the former GM of Arizona and San Diego. He's been the Dodgers' senior vice president of baseball ops for the last few years. There's talk the Mets could be trying to lure him in for this gig. And also, I'm going to give you the long shot one. Well, aside from Theo Epstein, I think Theo is kind of a long shot, but not as much as the guy I'm going to mention in a minute. But, Theo, now don't forget this, the former Cubs Red Sox executive right now, who's been working in the commissioner's office since leaving the Cubs last year. This is a guy with 3 world championships to his name, the 04 Red Sox, the 07 Red Sox, and the 16 Cubs. This is a guy that has a pedigree of winning. One of the youngest and most successful general managers ever. He's not even 50 yet, and has already turned 2 teams from. He really took the Red Sox from nothing and turned them into a perennial winner. Still to this day, 10 years after his departure from the Red Sox, his fingerprints are still felt within that organization, and they're still playing meaningful baseball. So, and the same thing, not so much with the Cubs this year because they dismantled, but trust me when I say I think next year the Cubs are going to be looking, they might not be a playoff contender immediately. I mean, when you subtract Chris Bryant, Javi Baez, and Anthony Rizzo from your team, you're going to have to replenish them. But I don't expect the Cubs to be a complete teardown either. But just to finish up too, now also one other interesting name that the Mets could consider would be Jeff Luhnow. Now, if you know who Jeff Luhnow is, he is the former president of baseball operations for the Houston Astros, who won a World Series with the 2017 Astros. This is a guy who was suspended for all of 2020 for his role in the illegal sign stealing and all that. So you have to remember, really, you'd be taking a chance if you hired him. But remember too, AJ Hinch and Alex Cora, who both were much more heavily involved in this, this whole deal with the illegal sign stealing in the 2017 Astros and everything like that. They're both back now. Hinch is managing the Tigers. Alex Cora is managing the Red Sox tonight in the game that I've been talking about between the Yankees and the Sox. So there still is a chance that you could see him back. Are the Mets going to be the team that give him the shot? I think that's the longest shot of everybody I just mentioned, because Steve Cohen, there's a reason why he brought in Sandy in the first place, to try and placate Major League Baseball and the other owners, to let them know that he's not going to do anything crazy. And if they're trying to teach this guy Luhnow a lesson and they don't want him back in baseball, at least at this point, I don't expect to see him back. And I don't think the Mets are going to be the one to give him the opportunity either. I think maybe a team with a little bit more, standing in the league right now with a more respected owner. And that's not taking anything away from Steve Cohen. It's just that I don't think Steve Cohen's going to want to present himself as the guy that's going to go against the wishes of Major League Baseball. At least not yet. He's still a little bit too new. His feet are still a little bit too wet. So he's going to want to slow walk that, even if he does eventually want to become the Mets type of George Steinbrenner guy. So, there's a lot that we just covered there, and obviously there's a lot going on in Boston right now, as Anthony Rizzo was just gunned down at second base on a fantastic throw by Christian Vasquez. The Yankees are trying to mount a comeback right now, but it's just it doesn't seem like it's happening. The Red Sox and the Yankees, this is going to be a photo finish between these two teams. How much would Major League Baseball love if we got the wild card game, a one-game playoff? Now, wherever the game would be played, it would probably either be played on Fox or TBS or one of these big stations, maybe even ESPN. And if you get a Yankee-Red Sox one-game playoff, it's going to be it's going to be a ratings juggernaut. It's going to be like an NFL football game, most likely. One of the higher-rated games all year. Everybody's going to want to see. Everybody loves when the Yankees and Sox play in the playoffs. The last time these two teams played in a one-game playoff was 1978, where if you're a Yankees fan, if you're a Red Sox fan, you remember this more clearly probably, as Bucky Dent got his famous nickname, Bucky Effin' Dent, when he hit his big home run in Boston to send the Red Sox home in 1978. But we're going to have to wait to see how that comes out, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm coming down to the final seconds here of my show. I want to thank you here for tuning in to Sports Talk New York with me here on this Sunday night. We covered a lot of ground tonight. I hope you had fun doing it with me. I know I did. I want to thank the guys for putting me back in. Rob sticking me on. Brian Graves behind the glass, the best in the biz. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I'll be back in a couple of weeks. Catch me on my podcast, Coffee with Cramer. You can check that out at Twitter at Coffee W Cramer, and check me out on YouTube where I'm live right now. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Check me out on YouTube, Coffee with Cramer as well. So thanks for sticking around. I hope you have a great rest of your weekend, and I'll catch you next time. I'm Rob Cramer. Have a good one.